Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Language of Leadership. I'm your host, Chuck Marting, and today our guest is Kevin Wallenbeck. Kevin, I'm grateful to have you on the show. And I did a little bit of an introduction just prior to us getting on, but I want to give you the opportunity to tell everybody about yourself and a little bit of your background.
Sure. Thanks, Chuck, man. I appreciate it. Glad to participate with you and your audience today. Should be hopefully pretty good, right?
Sure, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, should be good. Yeah, man, I've had a pretty good life. It's been pretty good. Um, I uh, I can tell you about business. I can tell you about family. So I'll talk about family first. So I've been married, be 30 years in May, which is pretty incredible. We're excited about hitting that milestone. I just turned 50 3 weeks ago. So, cruising right through the old age timeline there. And we have three daughters. Fun fact or scary fact, we haven't yet determined what's the status there, but they're all married. They all
Wow.
got married at 21 years old.
Wow.
Every one of them. I don't know why that wasn't planned, but I did say at my youngest daughter's wedding a couple of years ago, I got to say something as the father, right? Of course, I'm paying for it, so that was my one request. I get to
Should
say,
be able to, yeah.
yeah, right. And so I stood up, and one of the things I said that I was grateful for is that everyone was finally off payroll. So that was good. They've been great. They were great daughters. They were absolutely fantastic to raise. Grateful for the opportunity, and my wife did an awesome job too. We live here in Nashville, Tennessee. We just moved from Michigan, where we were there for about 22 years, and I grew up in the southern tier of New York in Watkins Glen, kind of nowheresville. But if you follow NASCAR, then you know where Watkins Glen is. If you don't,
Hmm.
then you have probably no idea. So, yeah. Man, I've had a good life. Business wise, I uh, I went to college to be in the FBI, and then I got married in college and decided that I needed to go to police academy. So I did that instead. It lasted about a year in there, and then we by that point you have enough instructors that tell you what the real deal is that I had to choose, right? And I know I got to know you a little bit. You chose that path and you served, and I'm grateful for
Yeah.
that. Thank you for being a
Yeah.
public servant in that way,
Yep.
man. I feel very blessed and grateful that you did that. But I chose not to, and so I did a bunch of different stuff when I was younger, and everything from uh, selling jewelry to cutting steel in a steel mill to being a janitor. Um, yeah, all kinds of stuff. And then finally got into the entrepreneurial world, which is where I really kind of where my thing is, my shtick is. And so I tried a bunch of different businesses, man. I tried all the MLMs, the multi-level marketing companies that you could think of, and while none of them stuck, there was one product that I really, really liked. We actually still use it today. And a Shackley of all things, if you're familiar
Hmm.
with Shackley.
Yeah.
And I remember it's the last one that I did, and I wasn't a salesperson on the entrepreneur side. Like I can explain that more in a little bit, but um, yeah. So I remember that somebody told me this one time at the very end of our kind of multi-level. I learned a lot about business going through the multi-level marketing trainings of all the different companies. They're great at it, man. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. And so I learned a lot. But one of the things somebody said is, hey, you know, the reason to get into a multi-level marketing company is one of two ways, one of two things, not to do it or to do it. And the question is, if you had hypothetically $1,000 worth of inventory of their products and they went out, you knew they were going out of business next week, would you buy all that you could or would you sell all that you had? And I was like, okay, fair enough. And so today I still use Shackley, though I don't do the business. But anyway, did all that, and then I had an opportunity through an interesting story. I'd worked with a guy for I say I worked with him. I mean, we worked in the same company. I was in Michigan, he was in Texas. I was in systems, he was in sales, and this random 5-minute meeting one time in Texas. I was setting up a software system. He came over, gave me his phone number because he was a salesperson. Said, if anything, you need anything, let me know. I said, great. That company went under. And then 18 months after that, I'm doing my own thing. He calls me up and he's like, hey, you remember me? I'm like, yeah, kind of, we met for 5 minutes. And he's like, hey, well, I started my own marketing business and I do radio, TV, newspaper, but I don't do anything else. And I just stopped at this RV dealership and they asked me if I could do their website. And I said, yes. So I'm sitting in their parking lot calling you because you're the only guy I know that does websites. And that's fundamentally the beginning of Interact RV, which over 18 years grew into 250 dealerships that we served as a
Wow.
software as a service. So it was a monthly recurring revenue model, which was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And had 40 team members, had 5 team leaders, and had that minority partner. That was the sales guy. His name was Ron. And we had a love-hate brother kind of relationship all through the business. And but at the end of the day, we were looking for a way he was 18 years my senior, so he was hitting 63, and we were looking for a way to get him X out of the business. And I could tell the whole story. He really wasn't wanting to, but at some point it was going to happen. So what was the plan? And long story short, as a person of faith, I wasn't looking for this solution. I was going to buy him out or find another minority partner, and God just placed this opportunity to sell right in our laps, and worked it all out. So in 2019, we went through 6 months of due diligence hell. It was the longest, hardest thing that I've done. And then we sold, and I stayed on a year, and I fired him after 4 months. That was my plan. I let him go. It was amicable. It was great. He got to set off into the sunset,
Yeah.
and I got to set up for some different directions. And then I left after about a year. I couldn't take the corporate haul. And so I left there, and yeah, now I'm doing some consulting, working as an integrator. So it's kind of like a part-time COO, and doing some coaching and consulting, and really enjoying that. And here I am, man, with you.
Dude, that's an incredible story. It's it's interesting hearing each one of the leaders that we've had on here, their backgrounds and where they're coming from. But I'm sure as we go through this interview and as you're talking to us, there's going to be things that you say they're going to resonate and confirm what other leaders have told us in past
Mm.
episodes of the language of leadership. And with that in mind, I wanted to ask you when we talk about leadership, when somebody says leadership, what does that mean to you?
I can tell you what I thought it used to mean.
Yeah, that would be
Want to
great. I
start
mean,
there? Yeah,
yeah.
so I was wrong. But so
I
back,
think we're all wrong when we first start.
I know, right?
We think we
I
know what it
know.
is, and then we
Oh,
come and get slapped with reality real quick.
we think we know, right? That's it. And so when I started out, one of the very first books I read, I was a reader, and of course, again, I revert back to those MLM companies, and they had you read a ton of books, and
Hmm.
even if it was from their founders, it doesn't matter. It was still good material. And so reading back then, um, one of the very first books I read was um, the E-Myth. So on my books, I got this bookshelf behind me that's, on video, you can obviously see it. It's, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tall, and it's got tons on there. And I got this little stack of about 8 books sitting across from me. And those 8 books, um, they are the books that I have probably reread at least 4 or 5 times, each one of them. And the very first one that I read was the E-Myth. And that helped me form kind of the basis of starting the business. And so when I did that, even though reading that book, I thought leadership meant, to be in charge, right? I mean, I don't mean from just a responsibility standpoint. I mean, even from a little bit of a power standpoint, like how how do you not? I mean, how old was I? I wasn't very old when I started, right? And so how do you not get a little bit of that that chip on your shoulder, if you will? I remember the first, probably one of my biggest failures actually as a leader.
Hmm.
It was in the first couple of years, and it was my first employee. We had two or three employees by then. So we started in 2003. I hired in 2005. And this was probably 2007. We were starting to hire people. And we had part of our business on the data collection side that was very critical to our business. It was our USP. It was a unique selling proposition. No one else had it. No one else was taking the time to build the data. And that's what made us unique in the marketplace because we were able to deliver an experience that no one else could because they didn't have the data. And so it was a critical piece of our business, but it was also the lowest paying, easiest to sideline team member requirement.
Hmm.
And so as I started to hire people that I was paying more in, what I felt like at that time, again, my leadership limited mindset was that these other positions were more important. And I remember having a conversation. Her name was Sherry. She was my first team member. I remember having a conversation with her, and we built the company remotely. So we were doing it over, it must have been Zoom back then or something else, but it was remote. It was early on. And I remember having this conversation with her, and I don't remember the exact words, but I remember the look on her face. And I will never forget the look on her face. And basically, what I made her feel was she wasn't as important as somebody else. I wouldn't
Mm.
try to do it. I wasn't intentionally trying to do it, but I couldn't walk myself out of that. And I apologized to her probably 5 times throughout her tenure there, and she's still there even after I sold the company. She's still working there. She's awesome. Um, but I will never forget that look on her face. Um, yeah, so that was probably one of my top failures. And I think that goes back to just feeling that immaturity and being a leader of like, even though I wasn't trying to, I really wasn't being super intentional in taking the time not to as a leader. And I think sometimes we get so busy as leaders, we have so much on our plate. From a leadership principle, if there's one place that you're going to slow down and spend the time, it's got to be with your people.
I agree. And when you were just talking about that, I need to ask you, was it a failure? Because
Mm,
because of it, you became a better leader, but you also recognized it. And I think that that's key. A lot of leaders don't take the time to actually see what you saw and how it affects somebody and
mm,
then take action on it because of it. Uh, I've seen, and you've probably seen leaders that it's all about them, and they forget very shortly that if it wasn't for the people around them, they wouldn't be a leader. There'd be nobody there to lead.
you're spot on. When I say failure, I tend to think of things as I forget who said it. I didn't make this up, but when I fail, it's just failing forward.
Yeah,
Yeah. I love that mental picture it gives me. So it is a failure, like in one sense, right? It wasn't but it didn't
aha
stop.
moment.
Yeah, it didn't stop me from moving forward, learning through it. So um yeah. Yeah, man. I just remember that look on her face, but she's doing awesome today and, and things worked out in the end.
Multi-level marketing, it's funny that you mentioned that because we've had other guests that have mentioned that as well. And I think that the models that a lot of them have do exactly what you said. They build that base for future leaders and for people that are going to become entrepreneurs and actually start their own business as a direct result of the things that they've learned there. It goes back to something that I've heard Jack Canfield say over and over again that true principles are going to shine through. And
Mm,
what truth is truth. And you can build on it, you can grow from it, you can learn from it. And I think that with multi-level marketing, the things that people take away from it and then gone on and had successful careers, it's been well worth the pain, sweat, tears, and family members you went and approached to buy all your products. Um,
You sound like you're experienced.
yeah, I've had my experience with multi-level marketing too. So
Right
I
on.
I think it was good for my growth and for my wife as well. And I think it helped us dip our feet into the waters and kind of get that feel because then afterwards you're like, well, it's not exactly this that we want to do, but we want to be our own boss. We want to be our own company. We want to be able to be the ones that build that culture and build that trust and build that brand. So that's been an amazing journey for us. And it sounds like it has been for you as well. I mean, what a background that you have from all different aspects of things. I can tell you with law enforcement that it was a great career. But I told my wife, and I've said in past episodes that I told her when it got to the point that it was no longer fun anymore, it was time to leave. And I can remember that day, that morning vividly when I looked at my wife and I said, "It's time. I'm
Mm-hmm.
done." And you just know your spirit, your soul just tell you enough is enough. It's time for you to move. So I think that you as a leader recognizing that and then recognizing your path and the things that you've done, you've obviously made some great decisions and because of that and trusting your instincts. And I think that that's something that a lot of leaders they fail to recognize is that gut instinct or that internal compass that's directing you. Sometimes we dismiss it because we don't recognize it at first. Is that something that rings true with you too?
Yeah, I think with the idea of that internal compass you're talking about, or that gut feeling, I think where that's gotten lost on me over the years is it creates it tempts me to create a sense of imposter syndrome.
Mm,
Yeah. Like I'm just not I don't trust it. And so it's there and it's like, well, that can't be right. Or, I if I make that decision, then it's really not me, or like I can't be that good. I mean in a
yeah.
prideful sense, but I mean, my gosh, you got to feel good about some of the decisions you make as a business owner, entrepreneur, or an executive, man. If you don't feel good about it, like, dang, like that's part of the
Re-
journey, you know?
it's a great part of the journey. And that's always been something that I've always enjoyed is having that part of it. We talked before the podcast and something that kind of rings true to me that I um that I that I have hanging on my bathroom wall. It kind of sounds funny that you have a quote hanging there, but it reminds me, and it's from the book Future Proofing You by Jay Stammett. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but he
Mm,
has a quote that just it nailed me to the core,
mm,
and it was this. It was that that fear causes more failure than anything else. Failure is something that we all are going to experience. It's something that we're all going to go through. And sometimes it's the paralyzing element that keeps somebody from doing something is that fear. And so fear will cause you to lose more things than failure ever will. You can fail over and over and over again, but the fear of failure is what stops a lot of people.
yeah, I'm with
And I
you.
know I've slaughtered it, but I
Oh no, man, you
it's
got your point across. We have a mutual friend, Aaron Walker.
hmm
Um, he
big
says
A.
some. He's got a quote that he says something about, are you? Oh man, I'm going to slaughter this too. I can't remember, but it's something along those lines about are you afraid of the fear of success, of failure, or like more, or the fear of success more? Like you're going to have one or the other. So like, choose one. you know,
Yeah,
Hopefully you choose the fear of success versus the fear of failure.
yeah, and it's something that becomes very real for you when you're in that moment. Um, because I remember a lot of times with my business, having to look at something and going, okay, are we going to go ahead and do this? And if I'm not going to do this, why am I not going to do this? Is it because I'm afraid of failing? Or is it because of a real legitimate issue that should be keeping me from doing it?
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
I've had people, and I'm probably sure that you probably had people that probably had no business giving me advice, but they thought that they were trying to help me by giving that advice. And I listened to it. I mean, but it's one of those things where you have to go by what your plan, and you know why you're doing the things that you're going to do. Even if nobody in your family, your friends, or anybody else understands it, you understand it. And it's having that faith in yourself that you're going to be able to carry it through and do it. Now, there's been times that I've done it and not known how I was going to do it, but then I had to look at the guys in my mastermind and other places to go to and say, look, I want to do this. I know this is what I'm supposed to do. This is where I want to be. What am I missing? And one of my favorite quotes, and the guys in our group will tell you, they hear me say this all the time. It's hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle.
Mm, that's a
Those
good
guys are
word.
those guys are seeing what I'm not seeing. And I'll tell you what, that group of men that I've been involved in, they have been able to see some things that have helped bring clarity to me and help me say, okay, that's what I was missing. That's why I'm not. That's
Mm,
why it's not working. So having those resources, I think, is very crucial. And I know that you are part of a mastermind too. In
mhm.
fact, we're in the same mastermind, but just a different
Different
group
groups. Yeah.
within the mastermind. Um, how has that helped and shaped you as a leader?
So, my wife, I've been in the mastermind. Them is called Iron Sharpens Iron. It's from View from the Top,
Hmm.
through viewfromthetop.com. And they, when I first started, I started in 2016. And so it's crazy to think how long I've been in that. And, we meet every week. So, I
Yeah,
mean, think about that. You meet with the same guys, 8 or 10 guys every week for what is that? 2016, 4, 6, 6, 7 years, whatever.
yeah, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. And then we meet a couple times a year in person, whatever. But I remember my wife being really skeptical at first when I started paying to be in a group, right? A different from like chamber and things like that. This was like something different. And I had tried some other types of groups that were, free or didn't cost much at all. And what I discovered is I couldn't, same people had the same problems every time you met. And yeah, and there was no commitment. Like they'd show up, maybe they wouldn't show up. And so when I started doing this, and my wife's like, "Man, you're like, are you paying for friends? Like, is that what you're doing?" And I couldn't answer her for a long time. It was probably, I say a long time, probably a couple of years. And I went back to her and I'm like, honey, when you asked me that question, I probably was paying for, not friends is probably the wrong word, but paying for connections or resources, whatever, opportunities. But really what it was, I think you just nailed it, is I was paying and am today for perspective that I don't have. That's the inside of the bottle. I can't see the label from the inside of the bottle.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that perspective in business and marriage and raising kids and relationships and all that, man, getting a different perspective, that's been like the number one value I draw out of being in a group for sure.
One of the things that I speak on quite a bit, it's one of the topics that I've been asked to speak on, and that is the loneliness of leadership. It's
Mm,
something that's very real, and it's something that every one of us as a leader experience at times and still do, depending on what phase of your business you're in, what you're doing at that moment in time. And it's a big part of leadership in understanding and recognizing it and knowing where to go from there and where to find that help or a resource or something is what's going to help get you over that loneliness of leadership and knowing that you're not alone. I think that is huge when you're dealing with leaders, especially today, especially after COVID, especially during COVID. That
mm,
really isolated a lot of leaders where their team was no longer right there in front of them. They were having to work remotely, and that changed a lot of perspective when it came to leadership and how you do it. So, success as a leader means many different things to many different leaders. So, what does success as a leader mean to you, Kevin?
It took me a long time um, to figure out to where I am now. And this has spilled, definitely been threaded into the business that I've been in. It's threaded into coaching that I do now. It's threaded into my family. Um, being an entrepreneur, being in business and in a small business, when you're at the top of the food chain, you're just talking about, in terms of leadership, a lot of times you don't realize and recognize the amount of responsibility that being at the top of the food chain there really is. People always look at the top of the food chain. They're like, "Oh, I would love to be there." It's like, yeah, yeah, it's a great place to be. Don't get me wrong, but it has some responsibilities and that come with it. And it took me a long time to learn this, and it's so simple. But success for me in leadership is going to be I need to love the people and the things I do around me. So if I don't love what I'm doing, I can't lead well. If I don't love the people I'm doing it with, then I can't do it well. And when I say love, I don't mean, you know, hugs and kumbaya and painted rainbows on old vans kind of a thing at work.
You're not meeting it in a weird way.
No,
That's
not at
what you're
all.
saying.
Yeah, I'm talking about like the act that love is to me like the intentional act of caring,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
A love
exactly.
is an action, right? So I have to be intentional about that. And so love first, then serve,
Mm,
then lead. So if you can't do it in that order, I don't think you can lead without love well. I don't think you can lead without serving well.
yeah, I agree.
One of one of the things that I had on my KRA, called my key results areas, I picked that up from Monterey Leadership that I did back in 2012 as a business. We took my leaders through that. And when I came back from that, we developed KRAs for everybody, key results areas. And it was, 3 to 5 top level. Here's the results at the end of the day I'm accountable for. It's not a job description like there's 25 things on it. It's just top level bucket, 3 to 5 things I'm responsible for. I'm going to get results in. And for me, the number one thing as the CEO or president or, you know, chief cook and bottle washer, whatever you want to call yourself, my primary job was to make sure that everybody else in my organization had what they needed to fulfill their KRA to the best of their ability.
Mm.
That's it. And so that came from learning how to love and serve, and then I could lead.
A lot of truth in what you're saying as far as that is concerned. And um, for me personally, in learning to love the people that I have on my team, the most gratifying thing for me is to see them in their personal growth
Mm.
or in their accomplishments and the things that they're doing. I think that is a major thing within leadership when you're able to sit back and you're able to see those things or recognize them as you're teaching or you're interacting with your team, seeing those principles or those things that you've taught come to fruition and that these guys are actually doing it and having success because of it. That is a huge payday for any leader to be able to see that and recognize that. Um, it's keeping that going and understanding that it's because of that leadership and that direction that you're giving them that they are having the success that they're having now. So
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Oh, don't get me wrong. You talk about love and serving and leading, like it's stinking hard.
Mhm,
I mean,
it
it is
is.
hard. If you're doing it right, it is hard work. Absolutely hard work. And you know, I think some of this is what I believe. I believe it's, probably the most rewarding relationships that I have in life are my wife and my children. I mean, I think most people would probably agree with that. If they have good relationships with their wife or their children, maybe it's a wife with a husband and her children or whatever it is, but in that family environment, like the people you're closest to, are probably the people that have the most rewarding relationships with. Um, and so starting there or coinciding that with your leadership at work, leadership at home, I guarantee you, if you nail leadership at home, work is not going to be a cakewalk, but leadership at work is a heck of a lot easier because it's harder to lead at home than it is in the workplace. That's been my experience.
Hmm.
My wife and I married, like I said
It's
earlier,
proving ground.
30 years in May, been married. And I was just schooled, I'll use that, by my oldest daughter and my son-in-law. And so my wife and I, been married 30 years, we never intentionally talked about like roles within our house. And so I would help out here and do this, and she would do this. And so for 30 years, I mean, we got stuff done, but there was always like this added layer of conflict. Like whose
Hmm.
responsibility is this and who does this? And it was unsaid I did the garbage, and it was unsaid that she did something and vacuuming or whatever. And so, but it was never talked about. And so I'm going on 30 years of marriage. We're empty nesters now. And starting to understand and realize that, man, like we kind of missed it there. And talking to my oldest daughter, my son-in-law, they we were talking with them about this and about roles and things. They're like, yeah, they've been married 6 years. And they said when we got married, the first thing we did was set up roles. And so it's not that it's for them, this is how they set it up. Ashley, my daughter, is responsible for everything, not responsible, accountable for everything inside the walls of her home. And Simeon, her husband, is responsible for everything outside the walls of the home. Okay, so I want to use the word accountable. This is what they use. I thought this was really genius for a young married couple to figure this out so early. They said accountability is not that I have. So Ashley's like, accountability is not that I have to always cook or clean or because it's inside the walls. But if I would like it done by someone else other than me, I need to ask because that's my accountability. I'm ultimately accountable. And then when Simeon decides that he's going to be helpful on his own and do dishes for me without me asking, that's a true act of service versus if it wasn't defined, it wouldn't be an act of service.
Hmm.
And so they just have figured this out. And I said, well, what made you guys figure that out? You know what they said? They said, Ashley said, well, you guys, as my parents, sucked at it. And Simeon's parents didn't do it very well either. So we got married. We were like, this is what we're going to change.
We're not going to do this.
Yeah. And so Sonny and I at 30 years have been having these conversations. And at first, it was really hard to have these conversations about roles with 50 years old, man. It's like, come on, but you have this figured out. And so, yeah, we're always learning, but leadership at home is hard. And so I went to my mastermind group and I'm like, guys, I think I'm going to approach this subject. They're like, I'm kind of scared. And funny thing was, I wasn't the only one
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
struggles with some of that, right? And so we've been talking and working through that, and she's been gracious, and we figured some things out. But that's leadership at home, and so that just makes me stronger in business and stronger at work and stronger with the team members and teammates that I have there as well.
I've got one other question that I want to ask you as we begin to wrap up our interview today, which has just been great. Thank you for your insight and some of the things that you said. It's been very powerful. How would you advise leaders to overcome the challenges that they're inevitably going to face on a constant or even daily basis? Not only as a leader, but be able to overcome those challenges within the team. What would you suggest to them to be able to do that?
I could give you a laundry list of books. I could give you a lot of courses that I've taken. I could tell you to get into a some type of business group that isn't superficial, that dives deep and asks the tough questions. And you should do all those things. You absolutely should, in the right time, do all those things. Um, but for me, there's one overarching premise that has been the motivator for me to do all those things. And I think everybody needs the right motivation to do anything. So if you do anything with the wrong motivation, then the outcome of that typically turns into something selfish, which normally only benefits you and not anybody else. So early on, I had a mentor. I worked for him. He's the only guy that's ever fired me. Um, and we're still friends today. But I worked for him, and I was a project manager and a developer. And I observed something in him that helped me come up with this definition of success. So, one of my definitions of success is being prepared for being in the right place at the right time. And I think as business owners and leaders, entrepreneurs, leading families, I believe by watching him that he was intentional about equipping himself to be prepared when the next opportunity came. And he not necessarily know what that was. And I picked up on that. He didn't tell me that, like, here's verbally what you need to do. I learned that from watching him. And so I instituted that in my life. And so when you think about like how do you overcome as a leader, I think understanding like your premise at your core, what it is, who it is, like what are you going to be, what's your motivation? And for me, it's about equipping myself for being prepared for being in leadership. And so I've had to continually reinvest in myself. I've had to continually equip myself. And I think leaders that don't, and there's been moments in my life when I haven't. I've had a season of just being stale, and it doesn't take long for those monsters, if you will, the ugly parts um, of not paying attention and not being intentional to show up in the way that we love, don't love, the way that we serve or don't serve, the way that we lead or lead poorly.
Yeah, you're very true. So I get a couple more things for you before
Sure.
we close. The first one is, you come to Denver, you and I go to lunch and we're talking, and you look at me, you say, Chuck, there's this one book, and I know you've talked about a couple other books, but there's this one book
Mhm.
that you've got to read. It'll change what you're doing. It'll give you another perspective. It'll be something that'll really benefit you. What would that book be?
I'm going to read three of them real quick. The one thing, the one thing, the E Myth, and rocket fuel traction, and who not how.
That's a few of them there. And you
Yeah,
know what's
so that's
funny?
on my, those are few in my stack of like eight or nine that are like must reads, have to read those things. I reread those. Yeah, I don't have just one, man. Sorry, I couldn't answer that.
But I think that's a good answer because I think there's a lot of different books that shape us and mold us, and we kind of put all of those different things together to coexist within our leadership. So I think it's a good
Yeah.
answer. Kevin, before we end, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I think sometimes as leaders, we give quite a bit to others, and we do it um, unselfishly, and we do it because of the love of what we're doing, and we want to be able to serve. And I want to let you know that it's appreciated, the things that you do. You're very active in ISI, seeing you um, in different aspects of that and within our communication. And I wanted to take that moment to acknowledge you and let you know that it matters. And to have people of your stature and people of your character be a leader and to step up and not be um, selfish in how you share that knowledge and understanding with others is something that we need more of in this world today. We need true, powerful, unrelenting leaders. people that are not afraid to stand up and to say, look, this is what needs to be done, and to take the leap of doing it as you spoke of earlier with love, compassion, and wanting to take care of the person that you're leading. And so I want to thank you for that and let you know that it matters and how grateful I am for that.
Yeah. Well, man, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Very thankful for that. And I'm very grateful and blessed for all the opportunities that other people have given me along the way that have allowed me to be able to learn and have mentors and things along the journey. There's one quick thing, if you don't mind, I'd love to give away.
Okay.
Um, and that is along the journey. I talked about motivations a little bit earlier. One of the things along the way that has greatly impacted my life is I got this document, this little worksheet one time from actually from Aaron Walker, and it's called "What Do I Want?"
Mm,
and and it's crazy because you ask people, well, what do you want? And it's crazy how often that question is so difficult to answer. And yet, at the end of the day, that shapes what we want and desire, shapes so much of the goals and the decisions that we make for our businesses and our families. So there's a worksheet called the What Do I Want? It's a free download. It's at viewfromthetop.com/resources. And the What Do I Want worksheet's right there. You can't miss it. So viewfromthetop.com/resources. Download the What I Want, print it out, take a half an hour. There's a number of questions there. So take a half an hour, sort through them. And I guarantee you, if you do this, you walk away with a little more clarity. You may have it all figured out, but you'll definitely have a little bit more clarity on thinking forward and making great decisions for your life.
it'll definitely get you started. That's for sure. I love that. Well, and I will make sure that we have that in the show notes along with your contact information. And so if people want to reach out to you, make contact with you, and maybe have some further discussions with you, they can do that. But
Happy to
Kevin,
help.
again, thank you for being on clear or the language of leadership and sharing your views on leadership with us today. And
My
I
pleasure.
look forward to having you back at some point to continue our conversation about leadership.
Sign me up. Thanks, Chuck.
All right, thank you.